If heaven could write you a letter today, if God himself could fold his words into an envelope, seal it with fire, and place it directly into your hands on this exact date, this message would be what was written inside. Not general words for a general audience, but specific, surgical, personal words written with your name, your tears, your history, and your future in mind. You did not stumble onto this message by accident. You did not find this by chance. The algorithm did not bring you here. Heaven did. And before you take another breath, before the noise of the world rushes back in and pulls your attention away, you need to understand something foundational, something that changes the entire way you see yourself and everything that has happened to you up until this moment. You were singled out before you were born. Let that settle into you. Not chosen after you proved yourself, not selected after you performed well enough, survived long enough, or became good enough. Singled out before the first breath filled your lungs, before your mother held you for the first time, before your name was spoken by any human voice. God looked across the span of all of human history, across every soul that would ever walk this earth, and he reached forward through time and placed his hand on you, not as a symbol, not as poetry, as a fact woven into the very fabric of your creation. The book of Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5 speaks of this reality when God says to his servant, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." This was not written only for the prophet. This was written as a revelation of how God operates with every single soul he deliberately marks for purpose. And you, beloved, are one of those souls. You may be sitting with that truth right now and feeling a quiet resistance rise up inside you. A voice that whispers that this cannot possibly be for you. A voice that reminds you of every failure, every fall, every time you walked away from what you knew was right. A voice that catalogs your inconsistencies and your wounds and your questions and uses them as evidence that God could not have chosen someone like you for something significant. But that voice is not the voice of heaven. That voice is the voice of every lie that was ever spoken over your life, every disappointment that was ever allowed to define you, every season of darkness that tried to convince you that you were ordinary, overlooked, and forgotten. Heaven's letter says something radically different. Heaven's letter begins with your name written not in ink but in fire, and it opens with these words, "I knew you before the world had a chance to tell you who you were." Think about what it means to be singled out before birth. It means that your personality, the very way your mind works, the way you feel things more deeply than others around you, the way you have always sensed something larger moving beneath the surface of ordinary life. None of that is accidental. It was architected. You were not made sensitive by accident. You were not made perceptive by chance. You were not given the ability to feel the weight of the room, to carry the burdens of others, to sense when something is spiritually wrong in an environment because of some random genetic combination. That was a deliberate design choice made by the God who created the universe before he formed you in secret. You were built for a purpose so specific that only you could fulfill it. There are people in your life who have never understood you. There are people who have looked at your depth and called it weakness. People who have looked at your sensitivity and called it instability. People who have looked at your refusal to be content with surface-level living and called it arrogance or dissatisfaction. And for years, perhaps for most of your life, you have carried the quiet ache of being misread, misunderstood, and placed in boxes that were never built for someone like you. But what if the very things that made you difficult to categorize were the clearest signs of your divine assignment? What if the reason you never quite fit was not because something was wrong with you, but because you were never designed to fit the molds that the world was offering you. You were singled out, you were set apart, and everything that made you feel like you did not belong was simply confirmation that you were built for a different kind of belonging. God's choosing is not passive. When heaven singles someone out, it does not simply stamp a seal on them and walk away. It pursues, it shapes, it allows certain things and prevents others. It opens specific doors and closes others with a finality that can feel brutal in the moment, but is revealed later as mercy. Every time a path closed for you that seemed like it should have opened, every time a relationship ended that you believed was meant to last, every time an opportunity vanished before you could grasp it, heaven was not absent. Heaven was authoring. You were not being punished. You were being positioned. There is a difference between a life that falls apart and a life that is being taken apart by loving hands, to be rebuilt into something that can hold the weight of what God has planned for it. This is what it means that you were singled out before birth. It means your life has never been random. It means your suffering has never been meaningless. It means your questions, as deep and as painful as they are not signs that God has lost track of you. They are signs that you are in the middle of a story that has not finished being written yet, and the God who wrote your name before the foundation of the world has not put down the pen. Right now, as you receive these words, heaven is asking you to make a decision, not a complicated one, not one that requires you to have everything figured out or to feel fully healed or to understand every chapter of what has already happened to you. Just one simple, powerful decision: to believe again, to open your hands again, to look at the seal that was placed on your life before you were born, and to say, I accept this, I receive this, I will stop running from the weight of what I was created to carry, and instead let it become the very thing that propels me forward. You are not ordinary. You never were. The world may have told you otherwise. Life may have handed you experiences that felt like proof of your insignificance. But heaven's letter, written with fire, sealed with love, and delivered to you on this exact day, says something that overrides every other voice. It says you were known before you were formed. You were chosen before you could choose. You were loved before you had done a single thing to earn it. And that love, that ancient, unyielding, fierce and personal love, is the foundation upon which everything else in your life is being built. This is not the end of what heaven has to say to you. This is only the opening line of a letter that goes much deeper, that speaks to your pain, your battles, your delays, your enemies, and your crown. But before any of that can be received, you needed to hear this first birth. That is not before birth. That is not inspirational. That is the bedrock reality of who you are. If you believe that this message was placed in your path today by divine design and not by coincidence, drop the number 404 in the comments right now. Let that be your declaration that you receive the seal, that you accept the choosing, that you are ready to hear the rest of what heaven has written for you. You are still here, and that matters more than you know. The fact that you did not close this message after the first words, the fact that something inside you leaned in rather than pulled away, is not a small thing. That is the pull of recognition. That is the part of you that was singled out before birth, responding to a frequency it has always known but rarely been given permission to acknowledge openly. So before we go any further into what heaven has written for you, take a breath. Not a hurried one, a real one. The kind that says, I am present, I am open, I am ready to receive what God has for me in this moment. Because what comes next in this letter from heaven moves into territory that many people have been afraid to enter. Not because it is frightening, but because it requires honesty. It requires you to look at the chapters of your life that you have tried to move past quickly, the seasons you have labeled as failures or mistakes or wasted years, and to see them through an entirely different lens. Heaven's letter does not skip over your pain. It does not rush past your wounds to get to the glory. It stops. It sits with you in the middle of what hurt, and it says something that can only be heard when you are truly still. The pain you carry was never punishment. Say that again inside yourself. The pain you carry was never punishment. Every wound, every betrayal, every season when the silence of heaven felt so loud it was deafening, every relationship that shattered in ways that left marks you still carry today. None of it was God turning his back on you. None of it was the universe deciding you were not worth protecting. None of it was the consequence of being the wrong kind of person or carrying the wrong kind of faith. Every single thing that broke you was in the hands of a sovereign God who chose you before birth, being used as raw material. You were not being punished, you were being prepared. And there is a difference between those two realities, so vast, so wide, so transforming that the moment you truly grasp it, something in you that has been locked for a very long time will begin. Think about the people in Scripture who were chosen by God for something significant. Think about Joseph, sold by his own brothers, thrown into a pit, carried into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten in a prison cell for years. If you had handed Joseph a camera in the middle of those years and asked him to record what his life looked like, nothing in the frame would have looked like divine purpose. Everything in the frame would have looked like abandonment. Everything would have looked like a man whom God had forgotten, whose prayers were bouncing off the ceiling of a dark cell and returning to him unanswered. But the God who singled Joseph out before birth had not forgotten him for a single breath of a single day. Every painful chapter was being woven with precision into a tapestry that would eventually save an entire nation. And what was true for Joseph is true for you. You have been in your own version of the pit. You have had your own seasons of the prison cell, where the life you believed you were promised seemed to be mocking you from a distance you could not close. You have watched people around you move forward while you felt stuck. You have questioned whether the gifts you carry are real, whether the calling you sense is genuine, or whether you have simply been deceiving yourself all along. And in those moments, the weight of your pain did not feel like preparation. It felt like proof that you were forgotten. But heaven's letter reaches into that exact memory, into that exact ache, and it speaks with the gentleness of a father who has never once taken his eyes off you. It says, I was there. I was in the pit with you. I was in the silent season with you. I was in the room when they walked away. I was present when the diagnosis came, when the door closed, when the night stretched so long you were not sure the morning would come. I was there and I was working. The wounds you carry are not evidence of divine neglect. They are evidence of divine investment. God does not waste pain in the life of someone he has chosen. He is too intentional, too precise, too deeply committed to the completion of what he started in you, to allow suffering to exist in your story without purpose. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 does not say that all things feel good or look good or make sense in the moment. It says that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. You are called according to his purpose. You were called before you were born, which means that every chapter of your story, including the ones that felt like they were destroying you, has been working in coordinations with every other chapter towards something that your natural eyes cannot yet fully see. This is not a message that minimizes what you went through. It does not stand at a safe distance, from your pain and offer you neat theological phrases as a substitute for genuine comfort. Heaven's letter is written by a God who entered human suffering himself, who wore flesh and walked through betrayal and abandonment and the cross, and who therefore speaks about pain, not from theory but from lived experience. When he says that your wounds were never punishment, he says it as someone who bore wounds himself so that yours would never have to be the final word. So what do you do with that right now? In this moment, in this season that you are currently walking through? You begin by releasing the lie that says your pain proves your unworthiness, the lie that says God would have protected you better if he truly loved you, the lie that says the delays and the losses and the broken seasons are signs that your life is off track. You release that lie, not by pretending the pain was not real, but by choosing to believe that the God who chose you before birth has not made a mistake with a single chapter of your story. Your preparation is not finished, but it is not purposeless. And the strength that has been forged in you through every fire you have walked through is not a side effect of your suffering. It is the very thing that will make you capable of carrying what God is about to place in your hands. You were not broken to be discarded. You were broken to be rebuilt into something that cannot be easily shaken because it has already survived what would have destroyed someone who was not chosen for this. Before we continue into the next part of what heaven has written for you, there is something we want to say directly and sincerely. This channel exists for one reason alone: to carry messages like this one to people who need them. People like you, people who are in the middle of their story and need to be reminded of who they are and whose they are. If this message has spoken to something real inside you today, we ask that you like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life might be changed by a single act of sharing. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, please do so now so that you never miss another message that heaven sends through this space. And if this ministry has brought value to your life, if these words have carried you through a difficult moment or helped you see your story differently, we want you to know that there is a support link in the description below. This channel is sustained by people who believe in what is being built here. And if you feel led to contribute, every act of generosity helps us continue this work and reach more people who are searching for exactly what you found today. It is completely voluntary. There is no pressure and no obligation. And whether you are in a season where you can give or a season where you simply need to receive, we are genuinely grateful that you are here, that you stayed, that you listened, that you chose to open this letter from heaven today. Because the rest of what God has written for you is still ahead. And the next part of this message moves into something that will stir something deep and holy inside you. Something about the battles you have been fighting in private, the ones no one has seen, and the God who has been watching every single one. Stay with us. Heaven is not finished speaking. There is a room in your life that no one else has ever been allowed to enter. Not your closest friend, not the person who knows you better than anyone, not even the ones who have loved you most faithfully. It is the room where the real battles happen. The room where you have sat on the floor at 2 in the morning with a weight on your chest that you did not have words for. The room where you have cried prayers that never made it past a whisper because you were not even sure you believed they were being heard. The room where you have wrestled with doubt and fear and the particular kind of loneliness that exists even when you are surrounded by people. That room, the one you have kept locked, the one you have smiled your way past in public while it ached privately, that is the room heaven has been watching most closely. This is the part of the letter that reaches past the theology and past the inspiration and past every general thing that could be said to any listener, and it speaks directly to you, not to the version of you that shows up composed and put together, not to the face you present to the world when you are managing your image and keeping your struggles below the surface, but to the you that exists in that private room, the you that has been carrying things in silence for so long that the weight of them has become so familiar you have almost forgotten what it felt like to be without it. Heaven sees that person. Heaven has never stopped seeing that person. And what God wants you to know, what this part of the letter is specifically written to say, is that not one moment of what you have endured in private has gone unrecorded. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 10, verse 29 through 31, Jesus says something that sounds almost too small to be significant until you hold it up to the light of your own life. He says that not a single sparrow falls to the ground without the Father knowing. And then he says something even more staggering. He says that the very hairs of your head are numbered. Not counted in a general sense, numbered, which means God is not managing your life from a distance with a broad awareness of your general condition. He is intimately, specifically, surgically aware of every detail of your existence. Every sleepless night has a number. Every silent tear has been caught. Every moment of faithfulness that no one applauded. Every time you chose to hold on when every logical instinct told you to let go. Every act of quiet obedience that happened in a room with no audience and no recognition. Heaven has a record of all of it. Think about what that means for the battles you have been fighting, because some of the hardest battles of your life have been fought in complete invisibility. There was no one standing with you when you chose not to give up on the calling that seemed to be producing nothing. There was no one watching when you got back up after the kind of fall that should have ended you. There was no one in the room when you forgave someone who never asked for your forgiveness. When you chose integrity in a moment where compromise would have been easy and undetected. When you kept praying, even though the silence had stretched so long, it had begun to feel like an answer in itself. No human audience witnessed those moments, but heaven did. And heaven does not forget what it witnesses. There is something that happens to the chosen ones that does not happen to everyone. The battles get bigger. The opposition gets more targeted. The seasons of testing go deeper and last longer than what seems fair or proportional to anything you have done. And if you have experienced this, if you have looked at your life and thought that the level of resistance you face seems disproportionate to the lives of people around you, you are not wrong. It is disproportionate, but not because you are cursed, because you are marked. The enemy of your soul is not strategic about ordinary lives. He does not deploy his heaviest weapons against people he is not concerned about. The intensity of the warfare against you is, in the most unsettling and yet most clarifying way, a confirmation of your assignment. You do not mobilize against a threat that poses no danger to your kingdom. And the forces that have come against you have done so precisely because what is inside you poses a profound danger to the kingdom of darkness. You have been misread by people who called your warfare weakness. You have been dismissed by people who looked at the hardness of your season and assumed it was the result of your own failures. You have sat in rooms where others seemed to be thriving and wondered what was wrong with you, why your road was so much harder, why the breakthroughs that came easily for others seemed to require everything from you. And in those moments, the silence of heaven on the subject was perhaps the most painful part of all. But heaven was not silent because it was indifferent. Heaven was silent in the way that a parent is sometimes silent watching their child work through something hard, not because they do not care, but because they know that the muscle being built in the struggle cannot be built any other way. God has been watching your private battles with the focused attention of a father who is both deeply moved by what you are enduring and deeply purposeful about what he is building in you through it. He has not missed a single detail. He has not misread a single moment. He has not confused your tears for defeat. He knows the difference between a person who is falling apart and a person who is being refined. And he knows which one you are. You are not falling apart. You are being refined. And the refining process, as brutal as it can feel in the middle of it, produces something that nothing else can produce. It produces gold. The book of Job stands as one of the most raw and unfiltered records of private battle in all of Scripture. Job sat in the ash heap of a life that had been dismantled around him, and he spoke honestly to God about what he was experiencing. He did not perform faith for an audience. He did not dress his agony in pleasant language to make it more palatable. He brought his raw, unfiltered, broken self before God, and he wrestled. And in the end, what God said about Job was not that he had handled it perfectly, not that his theology had been flawless throughout the process, but that Job had spoken what was right. The honesty of the battle was honored. The faithfulness of the wrestling was seen. And the restoration that followed was so complete, so specific, so lavish, that it could only have come from a God who had been paying very close attention to every detail of what was lost. Your private battles have been building something in you, something that cannot be faked, and cannot be shortcut, and cannot be downloaded or inherited from someone else. They have been building a resilience that is not brittle optimism, but genuine, tested, fire-proven faith. They have been building a compassion in you that can only come from someone who has genuinely suffered, which is why the people who will eventually come to you for help will not need your credentials or your platforms or your polished presentations. They will need exactly what your suffering has produced in you. The ability to sit with someone in their darkest room and not flinch. The ability to say, I know what this feels like, and mean it from the deepest place of lived experience. Heaven has been watching your private battles because heaven knows that what is being forged in those battles is the very thing your assignment requires. The calling that was placed on you before you were born cannot be fulfilled by someone who has only ever known ease. It requires someone who has been tested in the specific ways that you have been tested, someone who carries the specific scars that you carry, someone whose faith has been stripped of every prop and every comfort and every performance and has survived. That is you, stripped down, wrung out, tested beyond what seemed survivable, and still here, still present. Still opening letters from heaven, still willing to believe that the God who chose you before birth has not finished with you yet. He has not even close. You have made it to this part of the letter, and the fact that you are still here, still listening, still holding these words close, tells heaven something important about you. It tells heaven that you are someone who is genuinely hungry, not for entertainment, not for background noise, but for truth that reaches the places inside you that nothing else has been able to touch. And what comes next in this letter speaks directly to one of the most confusing and painful experiences that chosen ones face: the experience of the closed door, the unanswered prayer, the delay that stretched so long it began to feel permanent. Because heaven has something specific to say about every door that refused to open for you. And it is not what the enemy has been whispering in your ear during the waiting. There is a theology of delay that most people never receive, because it requires a level of trust that feels almost unreasonable in the middle of the waiting. It requires you to believe that the God who chose you before birth, the God who has been watching your private battles with detailed attention, is not slow, is not forgetful, is not indifferent to the timeline of your life, but is instead operating with a precision and a wisdom so far beyond your current vantage point that what looks like inaction from where you are standing is actually the most active and intentional kind of love imaginable. The doors that did not open for you were not rejections. They were redirections, and every redirection in the life of a chosen one is wrapped inside something that this message was titled to proclaim. A warning wrapped in love. Think about the doors you have stood before in your life, the opportunities that seemed perfectly aligned with everything you had been praying for, that seemed to carry all the right signs and all the right timing, and that closed anyway. Think about the relationships you believed were part of your destiny, the ones you invested in with everything you had, that ended in ways that left you questioning your own discernment. Think about the seasons when you followed what you believed was God's leading and found yourself not in the open field you expected, but in a narrower, harder place than where you started. In those moments, the silence of heaven on the subject of why felt like the cruelest part of the entire experience. But heaven's letter speaks to every one of those moments, now with clarity that the moment itself did not allow. It says, I closed that door because I could see what was behind it that you could not. I ended that season because I could see where that road was leading, and I loved you too much to let you travel it. I delayed that breakthrough because I could see that the version of you who existed at that moment was not yet the version who could steward what the breakthrough carried without being undone by it. Every closed door in your life was an act of protection. Every delay was an act of preparation. Every redirection was the hand of a God who sees the end from the beginning, choosing your future over your comfort in the present. This is what it means that God's warning is wrapped in love. Because a warning, by its very nature, is an interruption. It is something that breaks into the flow of where you are heading and says, stop, not this way, not right now, not this person, not this decision. And interruptions do not feel loving in the moment. They feel like opposition. They feel like obstacles. They feel like the universe conspiring against the very thing you want most. But when the warning comes from a God who chose you before birth, who has watched every private battle, who has numbered every hair on your head and recorded every tear, the interruption is not opposition. It is the most personal and specific act of love he could offer you in that moment. Proverbs chapter 3 verses 5 and 6 speaks to this reality with words that are simple enough to memorize, but deep enough to spend a lifetime unpacking. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. The instruction to lean not on your own understanding is not a dismissal of your intelligence. It is an acknowledgement that your understanding, as genuine and as thoughtful as it is limited by your vantage point. You can only see from where you are standing. God sees from where he is standing, which is outside of time itself, from a perspective that holds your entire story simultaneously, past, present, and future, in a single gaze. From that vantage point, the door he closed was not a mistake. The prayer he answered differently than you asked was not a failure of the system. The delay you have been enduring is not evidence that your faith is insufficient or that your calling was never real. It is evidence that you are being positioned. And positioning takes time. It takes the kind of time that feels wasteful from the inside, but looks like precision from the outside. There are things that were positioned in your life during the delays that you do not yet have full sight of. There are connections that are being arranged right now in the invisible realm that will only make sense when they manifest in the natural. There are doors that are being prepared for you that could not have been opened at the moment you were standing before the ones that closed, because you were not yet the person who could walk through them with the grace and the wisdom and the capacity that they require. The delay was not a denial. The delay was a development. And here is what heaven needs you to hear most clearly in this part of the letter. The closed doors were not the enemy winning. The closed doors were God winning on your behalf in a way that your natural eyes were not equipped to recognize at the time. The enemy wanted you through those doors. The enemy knew what was waiting for you on the other side of certain relationships, certain opportunities, certain paths, and he was celebrating every step you took toward them. And it was God, the same God who chose you before birth, who stepped in with a warning wrapped in love and closed what needed to be closed, ended what needed to end, and redirected you towards something your natural eyes could not yet see. You may have grieved those closed doors deeply. You may have spent weeks or months, or even years mourning what you believed was lost. And that grief was real, and it was valid, and heaven holds it with tenderness. But heaven also wants you to know that what you thought you lost was never yours to keep. It was never part of the plan that was written for you before you were born. And what is written for you, what has your name on it in heaven's records, cannot be taken from you by any closed door, any delay, any betrayal, any failure, or any force that has ever come against you. This channel exists to carry messages like this one to people who are in the middle of their story, people like you who need to be reminded that the delays in their lives are not the end of their stories. If these words have met you in a place that needed to be met today, we want to be honest with you about something. Creating content like this, content that is researched with care, prayed over, and crafted to reach the deepest places of the human heart, requires time and resources, and a level of dedication that is only possible because of people who believe in this work. If this ministry has brought genuine value to your life, if these words have helped you see your delays differently, your closed doors with new eyes, and your waiting seasons with fresh hope, there is a link in the description below where you can support this channel. It is completely voluntary. It will never be a condition of receiving what heaven has for you through this space. Every contribution, regardless of size, helps us continue to reach people who are searching for exactly what you found today. And if this is a season where you are not in a position to give financially, we receive that with just as much grace. Your presence here, your faithfulness to stay and listen, your willingness to open this letter from heaven, that itself is something we do not take for granted. We are genuinely grateful for you, because what God is about to say in the sections ahead is even more specific and even more powerful than what has already been spoken. And you need to be present for all of it. There is a kind of love that makes you uncomfortable, not because it is harsh or unkind, but because it refuses to let you stay where you are. It refuses to applaud your settling. It refuses to smile politely at your excuses. It refuses to leave you in the comfortable fog of a life that is less than what you were created for. It is the kind of love that knocks on the door at inconvenient hours, that interrupts the carefully constructed peace you have made with your limitations, that reaches into the places you have sealed off and says, I am not finished with what is in here yet. This is the love of God towards you, not the soft, agreeable, endlessly accommodating version of love that asks nothing and disturbs nothing, but the fierce, relentless, pursuing love of a father who would rather disrupt your comfort to walk toward a destiny you were never meant to miss. This part of the letter from heaven is perhaps the most tender and the most demanding at the same time, because it speaks about the love that warns, and a love that warns is a love that has made a decision. It has decided that your future matters more than your momentary ease. It has decided that the fullness of what you were created to become is worth more than the temporary comfort of being left alone in a lesser version of yourself. It has decided that it will not stay silent when silence would cost you everything. You have felt this love before, even if you did not recognize it at the time. You felt it in the restlessness that would not leave you alone during seasons when you tried to convince yourself that where you were was enough. You felt it in the persistent sense that something more was waiting, something larger, something that kept pulling at the edges of the ordinary life you were trying to construct for yourself. You felt it in the divine interruptions, the unexpected turns, the moments when life as you had planned it was dismantled so thoroughly that you had no choice but to look up and ask, what is really happening here? That restlessness, that persistent pull, those sacred interruptions, all of it was the love of God refusing to let you go comfortably into a life that was smaller than the one He wrote for you before you were born. The book of Revelation chapter 3 verse 19 contains one of the most clarifying statements in all of Scripture about the nature of divine love. God says, "Those whom I love I rebuke and discipline, so be earnest and repent." This is not the language of a God who is distant or punishing or indifferent. This is the language of a God who is so personally invested in people He has chosen that He will not simply observe their drift without responding to it. The rebuke is not anger. The discipline is not rejection. Both are expressions of a love so committed to your wholeness and your destiny that it will do whatever is necessary to keep you moving toward it. Think about the seasons in your life when God's love felt most uncomfortable. The seasons when something you were holding on to was taken from you before you were ready to release it. The seasons when a comfort was removed that you had come to depend on in ways that were replacing your dependence on God Himself. The seasons when the life you had carefully built around a set of assumptions was shaken at its foundation, and you had to rediscover what was actually solid and what was not. In those seasons, the love behind what was happening was almost impossible to feel. What was easier to feel was the disruption, the loss, the fear of what was changing. But looking back now, with the distance that time provides, can you see that what was removed was not arbitrarily taken, but lovingly cleared to make room for something that could not have entered your life while those things were still occupying the space? God's love does not warn you because it is disappointed in you. It warns you because it sees the road ahead and it knows what is coming. And it is unwilling to let you walk into it unprepared or unprotected. A good father does not let his child wander toward danger without calling out. A good shepherd does not watch his sheep move toward the edge of the cliff without intervening. And the God who chose you before birth, who has numbered the very hairs on your head, who has watched every private battle you have ever fought, who has orchestrated every closed door and every delay with redemptive precision, is not about to go silent. Now when the stakes are highest, because the stakes are highest right now. The season you are currently in is not an ordinary season. Something is shifting in the spiritual atmosphere around your life. Something is being decided in the invisible realm that will manifest in the natural in ways you will not be able to ignore. And in this exact moment, the love of God is reaching towards you with a warning that is simultaneously the most serious thing you have ever needed to hear, and the most loving thing you could possibly receive. It is saying, wake up. Come back. Do not trade what is eternal for what is temporary. Do not let the comfort of the familiar keep you from stepping into the unfamiliar territory where your destiny is waiting. There are specific things that God's love is warning you about right now in this season. Things you already know in that deep interior place where honesty lives, even if you have been avoiding the full weight of that knowing. There is a compromise that has been slowly becoming acceptable that was never meant to find a home in your life. There is a relationship, a habit, a mindset, a pattern of thinking that has been quietly pulling you away from the version of yourself that heaven is calling you toward. There is a voice you have been listening to, perhaps your own voice in your most discouraged moments, that has been telling you that the dream is too large, the calling is too demanding, the gap between who you are now and who God says you are is too wide to cross. And the love of God is interrupting every one of those things right now with a warning that carries no condemnation, but carries every ounce of heaven's fierce and committed desire for your wholeness. Hebrews chapter 12 verse 6 says that the Lord disciplines the one he loves. The Greek word used for discipline in that passage carries the meaning of training, of education through experience, of the kind of shaping that produces maturity and strength. God is not disciplining you because you have failed beyond recovery. He is disciplining you because you are worth the investment of his personal attention. The father who disciplines his child is the father who believes his child has a future worth protecting. The God who warns you is the God who sees a destiny in you that he is committed to seeing fulfilled, regardless of how far you feel from it in this moment. This love that warns is also a love that waits. It does not issue its warnings and then withdraw. It speaks, and then it leans in closer, watching for your response, ready to receive whatever you bring back to it. It does not warn you from the other side of a closed door. It warns you while standing in the room with you, hand extended, eyes full of something that is not disappointment but possibility. It is looking at you right now, in the middle of whatever you are carrying, in the middle of whatever you have been running from or settling for or slowly drifting away from, and it is saying, I see all of it, and I am still here. And the door back to the fullness of what I created you for is still open. That door being open is not a guarantee that it will remain open indefinitely without a response from you. Love warns precisely because time matters. Seasons turn. Moments of grace have windows. And the God who loves you fiercely enough to interrupt your comfort is also the God who honors your freedom enough to allow you to choose your own response to what he is saying. What he is asking of you right now is not perfection. It is not a complete resolution of every struggle or a full return to a place of spiritual wholeness that feels miles away. He is asking for a turn, a single, sincere, deliberate turn toward him, a willingness to say, I hear the warning, I receive the love inside it, and I am choosing to move toward you rather than away. That turn made in this moment changes everything that comes next. You are still turning. Even now, even in the middle of reading these words, something in you is in the process of turning. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, not with a complete resolution of every question you are carrying, but turning nonetheless. And that turning, however small it feels from the inside, is not small to heaven. Heaven measures differently than we do. Heaven does not evaluate the size of the step. Heaven evaluates the sincerity of the direction, and the direction you are moving in right now toward honesty, toward openness, toward the God who has been pursuing you with a love wrapped in warning. That direction is the one that changes everything. But there is something that heaven needs you to confront in this part of the letter. Something that the chosen ones, perhaps more than anyone else, struggle to face directly, because the chosen ones are often the most gifted at surviving. They are the ones who have learned to function in the middle of lack, to smile through the weight, to keep moving forward even when the forward motion is costing them more than anyone around them knows. And that survival instinct, as necessary as it has been, can become the very thing that prevents you from fully receiving what God is trying to give you. Because receiving requires stillness. It requires vulnerability. It requires an admission that you cannot do this alone, and that the strength you have been relying on, as remarkable as it is, was never meant to be the whole story. Heaven's letter reaches this section, and it speaks about something that many people prefer to avoid. It speaks about what is at risk, not to frighten you, not to manipulate you through fear, but because a love that is genuine does not hide the stakes from the person it is trying to reach. A doctor who truly cares about their patient does not soften the truth of a diagnosis to the point where the patient fails to understand the urgency of the treatment. A loving parent does not protect their child from the knowledge that certain roads lead to certain outcomes. And God, whose love for you is more fierce and more specific than any human love you have ever known, will not stay silent about what is at risk simply to preserve your comfort. What is at risk is not your salvation in the broad theological sense. What is at risk is the fullness of what you were made for. There is a version of your life that is full, that is aligned, that is walking in the specific gifts and the specific calling and the specific relationships and the specific impact that were written for you before you were born. And there is another version of your life, a diminished version, a version where the gifts are buried under layers of fear and compromise and the accumulated weight of unchosen battles, where the calling is acknowledged but never fully stepped into, where the impact you were designed to have on the world around you remains mostly potential rather than reality. Both versions of your life are possible. The one that manifests depends largely on the choices you make in seasons, exactly like the one you are standing in right now. This is not a condemnation. This is a clarification. God is not telling you that you have already forfeited the fullness. He is telling you that the fullness is still available, that the gifts He placed in you before birth are still present, still waiting to be fully activated, still carrying the same potential they carried when He first breathed them into you. But they require your cooperation. They require your willingness to stop playing small, to stop negotiating with the fears that have been keeping you at the edge of your calling rather than in the center of it, to stop apologizing for the size of what God placed inside you and instead begin to steward it with the seriousness it deserves. The parable of the talents in Matthew chapter 25 is one of the most confronting stories Jesus ever told, not because of the servant who doubled what he was given, but because of the servant who buried his talent in the ground out of fear. That servant did not destroy his talent. He did not spend it on something wasteful. He simply hid it. He kept it safe. He protected it from the risk of being lost by never putting it into play. And yet, the response of the master upon his return was not gentle understanding of the servant's fear. It was grief and rebuke, because the master knew what that talent could have produced, knew the lives it could have touched, knew the kingdom it could have advanced. And he watched all of that potential go unrealized because the servant chose safety over faithfulness. You have been given talents, not one, not two, many, and some of them have been buried, not out of malice, not out of laziness, but out of the specific kind of fear that chosen ones carry, the fear that if you truly step into the fullness of what you were made for and it does not work, the loss will be catastrophic. The fear that the size of your calling is too large for the size of your faith in this season. The fear that you are not yet ready, not yet healed enough, not yet whole enough, not yet free enough from the marks of everything you have walked through to carry what God is asking you to carry. But heaven's letter speaks to that fear directly, and it says, "I did not call you because you were ready. I called you because I am able." And the same God who chose you before birth and watched every private battle and redirected every step is the same God who will be present in the stepping out. You do not step out into emptiness. You step out into the hands of the one who has been holding you all along. What would it look like for you to stop burying even one of the gifts that has been waiting underground? What would it look like to take one step? Not 10 steps, not a complete transformation overnight, but one deliberate, faithful step toward the thing you know you were made for, but have been keeping safely out of reach. That one step, taken in the direction of your God-given assignment, is the step that heaven is waiting for. It is the step that begins to shift things in the invisible realm that will soon manifest visibly in ways you cannot yet anticipate. This is the moment to make that choice. Not when you feel more ready, not when the circumstances are more favorable, not when the fear has completely subsided, because the fear will not completely subside before the step. The fear subsides during the step. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision that what God has called you toward is more important than the fear that stands between you and it. Before we move into the next part of this letter, we want to pause and speak to you directly and from the heart. This channel exists because people just like you need messages like this one, and creating them with the care and the depth, the prayerfulness that they deserve takes real time and real dedication. If these words have stirred something true inside you today, if they have helped you to see the gift inside you with new eyes and the calling on your life with fresh courage, we ask that you would take a moment right now to like this video. It is a small action that carries a large impact because it helps this message reach more people who are sitting in the same place you were sitting when you first pressed play. If you have not yet subscribed, please do that now. This channel is a space where heaven's letters keep arriving, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. And if this ministry has been a genuine source of strength and spiritual nourishment in your life, there is a link in the description below where you can partner with us to keep this work going. Every contribution goes directly towards sustaining a space where people like you can find what you found here today. It is completely voluntary, given only as you feel led, and received with deep and genuine gratitude. And if this is not your season to give financially, your presence, your faithfulness, and your willingness to stay and receive are gifts to this channel that we do not take lightly. Heaven has more to say to you. And the next part of this letter moves into territory that will make everything to come before it begin to connect in ways that will take your breath away. There is a war that has been fought over your life, not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech designed to make you feel important or to add dramatic weight to an otherwise ordinary existence. A real war waged in a realm that your natural eyes cannot see, with real stakes, real combatants, and real consequences that have been bleeding into the natural events of your life in ways you may have attributed it to bad luck, bad timing, or simply the randomness of a difficult world. But nothing about what has come against you has been random, and nothing about the outcome of that war is in question. Because here is what heaven needs you to understand with absolute clarity in this part of the letter. Every force that has ever conspired against your destiny has already been defeated. Not will be defeated. Not is in the process of being defeated. Has been defeated. Past tense. finished, settled in the courts of heaven before the battle ever reached the ground of your daily life. This is the part of the letter that shifts something in the atmosphere, because there is a difference between knowing that God is on your side and knowing that the enemy has already lost. The first is a comfort, the second a weapon, and you were not given this message today simply to be comforted. You were given this message to be armed, to walk away from these words with a clarity about your spiritual reality that changes the way you face every obstacle, every accusation, every setback, and every whisper of defeat that has been following you through the corridors of your life. Let us go back to the beginning of what was written for you before you were born. Before you took your first breath, before the world had a chance to form you, or wound you, or try to define you by its own limited understanding of who you were, a seal was placed on your life. We have spoken of this seal before in this letter, but what we have not yet spoken about is the fact that the moment that seal was placed, it became a target, because the enemy of your soul is not strategic about unremarkable things. He does not mobilize against ordinary lives. He does not deploy his most sophisticated weapons against people whose destinies pose no threat to his kingdom. The level of opposition you have faced throughout your life is not evidence of your weakness. It is evidence of the magnitude of what was sealed into your life before you were born. Think about the attacks that came against you earliest. The things that tried to derail you before you even had the vocabulary to understand what was happening spiritually. The rejection in childhood that tried to convince you that you were not worth staying for. The trauma that tried to shut down the gift before it had a chance to fully emerge. The voices in formative years that spoke diminishment over you at the exact moments when you were beginning to sense the size of what was inside you. None of that was accidental. It was targeted. The enemy saw the seal. He saw what was written. And he began his campaign to prevent you from ever stepping into the fullness of what that seal contained. Not because he believed he could ultimately win, but because every year he could keep you living below your calling was a year the kingdom of heaven was robbed of what your life was designed to produce. But here is where the letter from heaven turns everything on its head. Because the same cross that defeated sin and death and the grave defeated every weapon that has ever been formed against you. Isaiah chapter 54 verse 17 does not say that no weapon will be formed against you. It says that no weapon formed against you shall prosper. There is a critical distinction in that promise. The weapons have formed. You have felt them. You carry the marks of some of them. But the mark of a weapon that did not prosper is not the same as the mark of a weapon that won. You have been hit. You have not been defeated. You have been targeted. You have not been destroyed. You have been opposed. You have not been overcome. And every single thing that came against you and failed to take you out was doing so in the face of a decree that was issued from heaven before the attack was ever launched. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. That is not a hope. That is a verdict. The courts of heaven operate differently from the courts of earth. In earthly courts, a verdict can sometimes be wrong. Evidence can be misread. Truth can be obscured. Justice can be delayed or denied. But in the courts of heaven, the judge is omniscient. He sees every piece of evidence simultaneously. He cannot be deceived or manipulated or pressured into a wrong verdict. And the verdict that was issued over your life, the verdict that said every weapon formed against you shall fail, was issued by the only judge whose verdicts are eternally binding and eternally correct. Which means that every enemy that has stood against you has been operating on borrowed time with borrowed power in a battle whose outcome was already decided before the first blow was struck. The enemy who sent rejection into your early years lost. The enemy who sent trauma to try to silence your voice lost. The enemy who sent betrayal through the hands of people you trusted to try to shut down your capacity for connection lost. The enemy who sent delay and confusion and spiritual exhaustion to try to make you give up on the calling sealed into you before birth lost. Every single one of them lost. Not because you are perfect, not because your faith has been without wavering, but because the one who fights for you has never lost a battle and has no intention of starting now. Colossians chapter 2 verse 15 says that on the cross, God disarmed the powers and authorities and made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them. The word disarmed in that passage is a military term. It describes a conquering general stripping his defeated enemy of every weapon, every piece of armor, every resource for further combat. The enemy that has been coming against your destiny has been fighting you with weapons that were stripped from him at the cross. He has been coming against you with the spiritual equivalent of empty hands, relying entirely on your ignorance of what happened at Calvary to give his attacks any power at all. Because a defeated enemy with no weapons only retains power over someone who does not know he is defeated. You now know. You now know that the warfare you have been in was never a fair fight in the enemy's favor. It was always a rigged fight in yours, rigged by the sovereign hand of a God who chose you before birth and sealed your destiny, before your enemy ever had a chance to formulate a plan against it. The attacks you have endured were real. The pain they caused was real, but they were always the desperate actions of a defeated force fighting against a verdict it could not overturn, trying to accomplish through intimidation and deception what it could never accomplish through genuine power. And this changes how you stand from this moment forward. It changes how you face the opposition that still shows up in your daily life. Because the enemy has not stopped sending weapons simply because they have been decreed to fail. He sends them still, hoping that you will look at the attack rather than the verdict, that you will measure the size of the opposition rather than the size of the one who fights for you, that you will feel the weight of what is coming against you and forget, even for a moment, what has already been decided on your behalf. Do not forget. When the attack comes, and it will come, because the marked ones are always targeted, remember the verdict. When the accusation rises, remember that the judge has already ruled in your favor. When the weapon is formed, remember that it was formed by a defeated enemy with empty hands who has no authority over a life that was sealed in heaven before the foundation of the world. You are not in a battle you might lose. You are in a battle that has already been won. And your assignment in the middle of it is not to fight for victory. It is to fight from victory. To stand in the reality of what has already been decided and to refuse, with every breath and every step and every act of obedience, to live as though the verdict had gone the other way. The enemy that came against you lost, every single one. And the ones that are still forming against you right now will lose too, because the decree has not changed, the judge has not changed, and the seal on your life before birth has not been revoked. You are still sealed, you are still chosen, and the battle is already won. You are standing at a crossroads, not the kind that appears on a map, not the kind you can photograph or point to with your finger, but the kind that exists in the invisible realm of decision and destiny, the kind that every chosen one eventually reaches when heaven has spoken clearly enough and long enough. The moments for response can no longer be delayed or deferred or dressed in the comfortable language of not yet being ready. This is that moment for you, right now, in this breath, this exact beat of your life. You are standing at the most significant decision point you have encountered in a very long time. And heaven is not holding its breath in anxiety, because heaven already knows how this ends for those who are truly chosen. But heaven is leaning in with the focused attention of a father who knows that what you choose in this moment will determine the speed and the fullness with which everything that has already been decreed over your life begins to manifest in the natural. We have traveled far in this letter. We have spoken about the seal placed on your life before birth. We have spoken about the pain that was never punishment but preparation. We have spoken about the private battles that heaven has been watching with detailed attention. We have spoken about the closed doors that were redirections wrapped in love. We have spoken about the fierce, relentless love that warns, because it refuses to let you settle for less than the fullness of what you were created for. We have spoken about the gifts that have been waiting underground for the moment you would finally trust the one who placed them in you enough to bring them into the light, and spoken about the defeated enemy, the weapons that cannot prosper, the verdict that was issued in heaven before any battle reached the ground of your daily life. All of that was preparation for this moment. Every word of this letter has been building toward this singular, sacred, weighty crossroads where you now stand, because information without decision produces nothing. Revelation without response changes nothing. You can know everything that heaven has spoken in this letter. You can feel the truth of it resonating in the deepest part of who you are, and still walk away from this moment exactly as you entered it, if you do not make a choice. And the choice heaven is asking of you today is not a complicated one. It is not a choice that requires you to have everything figured out, or to feel completely healed, or to have resolved every question that is still unanswered in your life. It is a simpler and yet more profound choice than any of those things. It is the choice to say yes. Yes to the seal. Yes to the calling. Yes to the uncomfortable and glorious and terrifying and beautiful fullness of what was written for you before you were born. Yes to the God who has been pursuing you with a warning wrapped in love through every season of your life, who has never once let you go even when you wandered, who has been working in every closed door and every delay and every private battle to bring you to this exact crossroads with enough of the truth inside you to make a genuinely informed decision about the direction of the rest of your life. In the book of Joshua, chapter 24, verse 15, Joshua stands before the entire nation of Israel, and he says something that has echoed through every generation since. He says, "Choose this day whom you will serve." Not choose this year. Not choose when you feel more spiritually prepared. Not choose when your circumstances have improved enough that the decision feels less costly. Choose this day. The urgency in that language is not manipulation, it is wisdom. Because Joshua had been alive long enough and had walked with God closely enough to understand that the crossroads moment does not stay open indefinitely. The day of decision is the day it is, and the person who leaves the crossroads without choosing has still made a choice, the choice to remain where they are, which is itself a direction. You have not come this far through this letter to leave the crossroads unchanged. Something brought you here today. Something kept you present through every section of this message when 100 other things were competing for your attention. That something is not coincidence. It is the same pursuing love that has been authoring your entire story, bringing you to this moment of decision with enough of heaven's voice inside you that the yes, when you speak it, will be spoken from the deepest and most genuine place in you. So speak it, not for an audience, not for approval, in the quiet interior room of your own soul, in the place where only you and God have access. Speak the yes that you have been building toward through every hard season, every private battle, every moment of grace that met you in the middle of your mess and refused to let you conclude that you were beyond the reach of what heaven was doing in your life. And if you want to make that yes visible, if you want to anchor this moment with something external that gives the internal decision a place to land, we invite you to do something simple right now. Scroll to the comments section of this video and type these 4 words. I choose my crown. That is your declaration. That is your public acknowledgement that you have stood at the crossroads and you have chosen the direction of the calling over the direction of the comfortable and the settled and the small. Type I choose my crown right now and watch what happens in the atmosphere around your life in the days that follow. Because heaven responds to declarations made from genuine faith with movements that your natural eyes will not be able to deny. The crossroads moment deserves to be marked. It deserves to be remembered, because you will look back on this day and you will know that something shifted here. Something that was locked began to open here. Something that had been approaching from the distance of promise began to feel, for the first time, genuinely close. Before we continue into the final sections of this letter, we want to take a moment to speak to you about something that is close to our hearts. This channel was built on a simple belief that there are people in every corner of the world who are standing at crossroads, exactly like the one you are standing at today, who need to hear a word from heaven that speaks to the specific shape of their specific journey. Reaching those people, crafting these messages with the care and the depth and the spiritual intentionality that they deserve, is work that requires real resources and real commitment. If this message has met you at a genuine crossroads today, if it has helped you find the yes that you needed to speak, we ask that you take a moment right now to like this video and to share it with at least one person in your life who you know is standing at their own crossroads and needs to hear what heaven has been saying. You may never know this side of eternity, what that single act of sharing produces in someone else's life. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, please do so now. There are more letters from heaven coming, and you do not want to miss a single one. And if you feel moved to support the work that makes these messages possible, you will find a link in the description below. Every contribution, whatever its size, goes directly towards sustaining a ministry that exists for people exactly like you. It is given freely, received gratefully, and never taken for granted. And if this is not your season to give, your presence here is already a gift we do not take lightly. The crossroads is behind you now. You have chosen, and what lies ahead on the road you have just turned toward is more than you have yet been told. Now that you have turned, now that the yes has been spoken in the deepest room of who you are, heaven wants to show you something, not something distant, not something abstract or theological or removed from the texture of your daily life. Something specific, something that has your name on it, something that has been in preparation for longer than you realize, shaped and refined and held in reserve for exactly the season you are now entering. And what heaven wants to show you is this: the crown that is being prepared for you is not a reward for a perfect life. It is not a trophy for flawless performance or unbroken faithfulness or a record without a single chapter of failure or doubt or wandering. It is something far more personal and far more staggering than that. It is a crown that was designed around the exact shape of your suffering, tailored specifically to fit the contours of every wound you have carried, every battle you have endured, every season of darkness you walked through without quitting. It fits you and only you. because no one else has walked your road. This is what glory looks like in the economy of God. It does not arrive as a generic blessing distributed equally among those who performed adequately. It arrives as a deeply personal, exquisitely specific restoration and elevation that is so precisely fitted to the story of your individual life that when it comes, you will not wonder whether it was meant for you. You will know, with a certainty that bypasses every doubt and every fear and every voice that ever tried to convince you that you were too far gone or too broken or too ordinary for something this magnificent, that this was always yours, that it was always being prepared, that every chapter of your story, including the ones that felt most like evidence against any future glory, was being woven into the specific design of what is now being completed on your behalf. The book of Romans, chapter 8, verse 18, contains a declaration that the Apostle Paul makes after one of the most honest and unflinching descriptions of suffering in all of Scripture. He says, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us." Not for us, in us. The glory does not simply arrive alongside you as an external addition to your life. It is revealed through you, through the very places that were broken, through the very wounds that were deepest, through the very parts of your story that you have been most tempted to hide or minimize or rush past on the way to something more presentable. The glory uses what the enemy meant as a disqualification and turns it into the precise location through which heaven's light breaks most powerfully into the world. Think about what this means for the parts of your story you have been ashamed of, the failures that you have kept in a room separate from your public narrative, the seasons of spiritual dryness or outright rebellion that you have bracketed off as evidence against any claim to divine purpose, the wounds that go so deep that you have sometimes wondered whether they made you unfit for the calling rather than equipped for it. Heaven's letter reaches into every one of those rooms with the light of this truth. The glory that is being prepared for you was designed with those rooms in mind. It was not designed in spite of what happened in them. It was designed around what happened in them. Your specific suffering shaped the specific crown. And the crown fits because the suffering was allowed to do its deepest work in you without destroying you. You have not been destroyed. We need to say that plainly and let it land. After everything that has come against you, after every weapon that was formed, after every season that felt like it would be the one that finally finished you, you are here, still present, still opening letters from heaven, still capable of hearing truth and being moved by it, still in possession of the gifts that were sealed into you before birth. However buried some of them may have been, however dimmed by the weight of everything you have carried, you are here and you are intact and you are standing on the threshold of a season that looks nothing like the seasons that preceded it. Because what comes after the crossroads is not more of the same. What comes after the genuine yes, after the real turn, after the decision to stop living below the seal that was placed on your life before you were born, is movement. Not gradual, imperceptible, barely there movement that you have to squint to see, but visible, undeniable. Others will notice and ask you, what happened movement? The kind of movement that makes people who knew you in your hardest seasons look at your life and marvel. The kind that fulfills the promise in Psalm 126 that says, "Those who sow in tears will reap in joy," that those who go out weeping carrying seed to sow will return with songs of joy carrying sheaves with them. The weeping season planted something. The harvest of what was planted in tears is coming in with a joy that will be proportional to the depth of the sorrow. Do not underestimate what was planted during your suffering. Every prayer prayed in the dark was a seed. Every act of faithfulness performed in a season that felt completely fruitless was a seed. Every decision to hold on when every reasonable instinct said to let go was a seed. And seeds planted in tears, in the deep and honest soil of genuine human suffering, do not produce small harvests. They produce harvests that exceed everything the planting season could have suggested was possible. The ground of your life has been seeded more richly than you know. And the season of harvest that is now approaching is not coming to give you a little. It is coming to give you everything that the sowing was always meant to produce. Your crown is being prepared with specific dimensions. It carries the weight of every year you waited, when waiting felt indistinguishable from being forgotten. It carries the light of every moment of faithfulness that no human audience witnessed but heaven recorded. It carries the width of every act of love you extended to others, even in seasons when your own reserves were dangerously low. It carries the depth of every time you chose God's voice over the louder and more immediately satisfying voices that were competing for your direction. Every one of those choices, every one of those moments, every one of those seeds has been incorporated into the design of what is being completed for you right now in the invisible realm. And when it comes, and it is coming, you will not receive it as someone who stumbled into a blessing they did not deserve. You will receive it as someone who was chosen before birth, who was tested in the specific fires that the crown required, who was sealed with a mark that neither suffering nor opposition nor seasons of wandering could remove, and who said yes at the crossroads when heaven extended the invitation to step into the fullness of what had always been written. There are people whose lives will be changed by what comes out of yours in this next season. There are people who are waiting, without knowing they are waiting, for the specific thing that only your story, with its specific wounds and its specific grace and its specific testimony, can give them. Your crown is not just about you. It never was. It was always about the people who would encounter you after you received it, who would look at your life and find in it evidence that the God who pursued you through every dark season is the same God who is pursuing them. The crown is for you, the glory is through you, and the world around you is about to see both. You have made it to the end of this letter. And if you have stayed through every word, through every section, through every truth that heaven has spoken across the full length of this message, then you already know that your presence here was not accidental. It was appointed. Every section of this letter was a stone laid beneath your feet, and you have walked across all of them, and now you are standing on the other side of something. Not the same person who pressed play at the beginning. Not unchanged. Not untouched. Something has shifted in you. Something that was locked has moved. Something that was dim has been reignited. And what heaven wants to do in this final section is not summarize what has already been said, but send you forward. Commission you, release you into the next chapter of your story with the full weight of everything this letter has declared, pressing at your back like wind into a sail. You were singled out before birth. That was the foundation. That was the first stone. And everything that was built on top of it across this letter was built on the unshakable reality that your life is not random, that your story is not accidental, that the God who formed you in secret and knew you before the world had a chance to name you has been the author of every chapter, including the ones that felt most chaotic, most painful, most far removed from anything that looked like divine intention. He has been writing all along. He has never put down the pen. The pain you carried was never punishment. The private battles heaven watched were never invisible to the only audience that ultimately matters. The closed doors were redirections from a love, too fierce and too committed to your future, to allow you to walk through the wrong ones. The warning wrapped inside every disruption was the voice of a God who would rather make you uncomfortable in the present than watch you comfortable in a future that was smaller than the one He prepared. The gifts buried underground are still alive. The enemies that conspired against you have already been defeated in courts whose verdicts cannot be appealed. The crossroads you stood at was the turning point that changes the trajectory of everything that comes after it. And the crown that is being prepared for you was designed around the exact shape of your suffering, tailored for the precise contours of your story, fitted for no one else in all of creation but you. This is your commission. You were not chosen to be blessed in isolation. You were not sealed before birth so that the fullness of what God placed in you would remain a private and personal experience, enjoyed quietly by you alone. You were chosen to become a flame, a living, active, visible flame that carries the fire of what God has done in your life into every room you enter, every relationship you are part of, every space your presence touches. The people in your life who have watched you endure what you have endured and still stand, still believe, still press forward. They are not simply witnessing your survival. They are witnessing the evidence of a God who keeps His word. Your life, the full unedited version of it, with all of its wounds and all of its grace and all of its seasons of darkness and all of its moments of breakthrough, is a testimony that someone desperately needs to hear. Isaiah chapter 60 verse 1 speaks a commission that was written thousands of years ago and is landing in your heart today with the freshness of a word spoken directly for this moment. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. Not arise when you feel completely ready. Not shine when every wound is fully healed and every question is fully answered. Arise now, shine now, from the exact place you are standing, in the exact season you are in, with the exact measure of faith and healing and wholeness that you currently possess. The light that is rising on you does not wait for your perfection. It rises because of His glory, not yours. And His glory is fully present in you right now, regardless of how incomplete you feel. So arise. Take the gifts that have been underground and bring them into the light. Take the testimony that you have been keeping private and begin to offer it to the people around you who are in the middle of their own dark seasons and need the specific kind of hope that only someone who has walked your road can offer. Take the yes that you spoke at the crossroads and let it be the first word of the next chapter rather than the last word of this one. Let the commission be received not as a wait, but as a release. The release of everything that has been held in preparation for this exact moment in your life. The world does not need a polished, perfected, have it all together version of you. It needs the real version, the tested version, the version that has been through the fire and carries the scent of it and the strength of it and the unshakable knowledge of who God is that can only be obtained by someone who has needed Him at the level you have needed Him. That version of you, the authentic, scarred, graced, chosen, commissioned version of you, is precisely what the people in your sphere of influence have been waiting for, even if neither you nor they have known how to name it until now. Go forward from this letter as someone who knows they were chosen before birth, who knows their pain was preparation, who knows their battles were witnessed, who knows their delays were redirections, who knows their gifts are real and their crown is coming and their enemy has already lost. Go forward with that knowledge as a foundation so solid that nothing the coming days bring will be able to move you off it. Not because you will be without struggle, not because the road ahead will be without its own tests and its own demands, but because you know who sealed you, and you know what was declared over you, and you know that the God who began this good work in you before you were born is faithful and committed and entirely capable of bringing it to completion. Now, before this letter closes, there is something we want to say to you from the most honest and sincere place we know how to speak from. This channel exists for one reason: to carry messages like this one to people like you, people who are in the middle of their story and need a word from heaven that speaks to the specific shape of their specific journey. Every video on this channel is created with prayer and care, and a genuine desire to reach the souls who need it most. We want to be transparent with you about something. This channel had its monetization removed by YouTube, which means that the work of creating these messages, the hours of preparation, the dedication to making sure every word carries genuine spiritual weight, is work that receives no financial support from the platform itself. And yet we are still here, still creating, still showing up with every message that heaven places on our hearts to deliver, not because of a revenue stream, but because of a calling. Because there are people exactly like you, who need these words and will not find them anywhere else, and that need is reason enough to keep going. If this message has genuinely met you today, if it has spoken to something real in you, if it has helped you see your story differently, or find the courage to say yes at your crossroads, or receive the truth that your crown is being prepared, and if you feel moved in your heart to help sustain this work, the link to support this channel is in the description below and also in the pinned comment. There is no pressure and no obligation. This ministry will continue to serve you regardless of whether you are in a season of giving or a season of receiving. But if you are in a position to contribute, every act of support, however small it may feel to you, directly enables us to keep creating content that reaches people who are searching for exactly what you found today. We receive every contribution with deep and genuine gratitude, and with the prayer that God returns it to you multiplied in the specific ways your life most needs. If this video has brought value to your life today, please take a moment to like it before you leave. Share it with someone you know who is standing at their own crossroads and needs to hear what heaven has been saying. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, please do that now, because there are more letters from heaven coming, and you do not want to miss what arrives next. You are chosen, you are sealed, you are commissioned. The crown is being prepared, the harvest of your tears is coming in, and the God who chose you before birth has not finished with you yet. Not even close. Go forward, beloved. The best of what He has written for your life is still ahead.